So I wanted to do something a bit different today and focus on the Xbox Series X because really I think that this is going to be the best overall generation ever for Xbox. And in order for me to explain why, I'm going to have to talk about a lot of different things. I mean, a lot of this stuff kind of goes overlooked by the general public, but if you really start to look into it, you have a lot to look forward to when it comes to the Xbox Series X, and probably more so than any other generation. Now, I'm not talking about it being the most successful Xbox per se, or in how many units it's going to sell, but from a quality standpoint, I believe that the Xbox Series X will be the best generation ever for Xbox, and I think it's going to be a very noticeable gap from their past consoles. Really, the Xbox 360 was their most popular console, as they were getting big exclusives, they had a good price, Xbox Live was firing on all cylinders, third-party games played best on Xbox 360, and really it was just an overall great console, disregarding the Red Ring of Death. After that though, the Xbox One came in, and thanks to Don Matrick and some very questionable PR, Xbox lost a lot of fans early on with the Xbox One. They basically squandered all of their momentum that they had with the Xbox 360 and destroyed all goodwill they had with much of the game community. And since that horrendous launch, they have tried to completely change that narrative, which is where Phil Spencer comes in. Now see, a lot of people look at the Xbox One as being one of the biggest blunders in gaming history. And while that actually is true, it was horrendous, and the messaging was all over the place. But I also believe it was one of the best things that could have happened to Xbox. Yeah, that's a weird thing to say, but I firmly believe that you have to make mistakes to be better. You cannot improve if you don't make mistakes. That's how we learn, and everybody makes mistakes, including these big publishers. Sony and Nintendo, as an example, does not have a perfect track record. The PlayStation 3 had several issues, especially early on. Not only was their console overpriced, but they also decided to go with the cell processor, and while yes, the PlayStation 3 was a powerful platform, it wasn't necessarily easy to develop for. They were also involved with the biggest hack at the time with the PlayStation 3 and compromised over 70 million PlayStation Network accounts. Then you have the PlayStation Vita, which failed miserably as well. I love that thing too, so that's really too bad. But then you have Nintendo, and they've made similar mistakes. Just take a look at the Wii U and the Virtual Boy. See, that's a thing though. A couple of mistakes doesn't necessarily define you unless you give up. It's really about how you bounce back from adversity, and that's exactly what you're seeing with Phil Spencer and Xbox right now. So for the rest of this video, we're going to focus on what he's changed and why you should be so excited. And this really boils down to 4 different things: power, backwards compatibility, first-party exclusives, and Xbox Game Pass. And right away, let's focus on power and backwards compatibility. If you really look at Xbox's history, for the most part, they've always had the most powerful console, or kind of. Technically, the Xbox 360 was not more powerful than the PlayStation 3, but because it was easier to develop for, most games looked and performed better on the Xbox 360. Then you have the original Xbox, which again was the most powerful console. Really, the only console that did not have this advantage was the Xbox One because Microsoft decided to focus on Kinect. Yeah, that was a mistake and a huge slap to the face of their hardcore audience. Power does matter to gaming enthusiasts. It doesn't always matter to the mass public, but to the more hardcore gamers, it absolutely matters as they want the best possible games they can get. This is why Phil Spencer and his team ultimately tried to change this narrative by ditching Kinect and putting focus back on that hardware once again. This is where the Xbox One X comes in, and really to this day, it's a very impressive console. Well, the Xbox Series X will continue on with that trend, and Xbox once again takes the crown of being the most powerful console on the market. This is why third-party games should for the most part perform better on the Series X than any other console. That means basically 90% of games will look and perform better on the Series X. Third-party games aren't always viewed as system sellers, but they absolutely are. In fact, some of the best-selling games are third-party games such as Red Dead Redemption, Call of Duty, and Assassin's Creed. They are extremely important, and by them playing better on the Series X, it does give Xbox an advantage for consumers who care about performance. Then you have backwards compatibility, which they've been focusing on pretty much since Phil Spencer took over. He made it a priority to have Xbox be backwards compatible all the way back to the original Xbox. The thing is, they play much better on the Series X. Minigames will double the frame rate, and it has things like Auto HDR, where it implements HDR to games that never had that feature. It's reportedly very impressive too, so immediately you're going to have access to thousands of games with your Xbox Series. This would mean nothing though if it wasn't for first-party exclusives. Now this may take a while to go over, but this really is the biggest change for Xbox going into next generation. Back in 2016, Microsoft shut down several studios, which put them at only 6 total studios. Yeah, that is just horrendous, and more or less, that Xbox meme of it only having Halo, Gears, and Forza started to actually become true. That's really for the most part all they could develop with their first-party studios. They just didn't have the manpower to make much of anything else unless they struck up a second-party deal where a third-party developer develops a game exclusively for the Xbox. Since then though, Phil Spencer and Microsoft made it their mission that they were going to improve here, as they did not just want to be in the game business, but they wanted to compete and give gamers a reason to invest in Xbox. That's why as of this video, they have 23 different studios, many of which has multiple teams working on more than one game. Yeah, the days of Xbox being ridiculed for having no games are going to quickly come to an end, as the Xbox Series will likely be receiving big exclusives at a faster pace than any other platform. I think that's really going to surprise a lot of people because it's something that Xbox hasn't been known for up to this point, but now it may end up being their strength. Now, to put into perspective to just how many studios that actually is though, PlayStation is known for their first-party studios, and they only have 13 studios. Granted, they do make very high-quality games, so it's not just about quantity, but that's the thing. Xbox has acquired several developers with a ton of potential. So let's take a look at some of these studios. Of course, you have your well-known studios like 343 Industries, The Coalition, and Turn 10. These will continue to be big studios for Xbox, developing games like Halo, Gears, and Forza. In many ways, these are the identity of Xbox, and they will continue to be big games for Xbox as they should be. But what about other big AAA games? Well, now Xbox has a number of big AAA studios. You have Obsidian Entertainment, which is working on multiple games including Avowed, a first-person RPG set in the Pillars of Eternity world. They are one of the best RPG developers in the entire industry, behind games like The Outer Worlds, which may also pop up sometime this generation. They aren't the only big RPG developers they have though, as they just acquired Bethesda, which includes huge franchises like The Elder Scrolls, Fallout, and the upcoming Starfield. Now there is that debate that these won't be exclusive to Xbox, but I do believe these will only be on Xbox, PC, and Android through xCloud. Then you have Playground Games, which is working on not only the Forza Horizon franchise, but also Fable, a legendary Xbox RPG franchise that fans have been wanting to see return for nearly a decade. It doesn't stop there either, as they now also own inXile, which is one of the more overlooked Xbox studios. This is actually a very talented RPG studio that hasn't always had the best budget. If you really look at them though, they just recently released Wasteland 3, which is an extraordinary RPG and a good sign of what they can do with that extra Microsoft budget. It was a game that predated the Xbox acquisition, but they did get to take advantage of Microsoft's money, and it really shows. So I think that this is a studio many are going to need to watch out for, as they are reportedly working on a big AAA game as of this moment. And speaking of potential, there are plenty more studios just like that, including Compulsion Games, who worked on We Happy Few. I oftentimes describe them as being a dark horse because they have a lot of potential to make a great game, especially with Xbox funding them. If anything, We Happy Few is a game that shows they can make excellent stories with a fascinating world, but they need some extra polish. Then you have Double Fine, which tends to make small and quirky games, but also great games. I mean, Psychonauts 2 looks amazing, and this is an interesting one. See, Microsoft also owns Rare, and while they mostly focus on new IPs such as Sea of Thieves and Everwild, they also have more value than just that. They also license out some of their old franchises, such as Killer Instinct and Battletoads. Now, we know Double Fine can make good 3D platformers, so hey, what about a new Conquer game developed by Double Fine? They certainly have the sense of humor to do it, So I'm just saying, this probably won't happen, but I can certainly hope. Now, Xbox also has big studios like id Software, Arcane, and Ninja Theory. These 3 studios will continue that AAA lineup with great single-player experiences. Arcane is an insanely talented developer with games like Prey and Dishonored. You have id Software, which has one of the most iconic first-person shooters ever, Doom. And then there is Ninja Theory, the masters of hack-and-slash gameplay with great stories. I mean, honestly, I believe that Hellblade is one of the best story-driven games, and I fully expect Hellblade 2 to continue on with that. What's crazy, though, is that there are still more studios to talk about. You have Undead Labs, another studio with a lot of potential. State of Decay is a fun zombie experience, but lacks polish. It seems like they're ready to improve that, though, with State of Decay 3. Then there is Machine Games with the Wolfenstein franchise, ZeniMax Online, which excels at MMO experiences, and even a Japanese studio, Tango Gameworks. Yeah, Xbox has a Japanese studio now which works on horror games like The Evil Within and Ghostwire Tokyo. This really goes to show you the diversity that Xbox has built up here with all of these different studios. The one studio with the most mystery, though, may be their most exciting one. The Initiative, a studio built from the ground up headed by DARRELL Gallagher, who has worked on games like the Tomb Raider reboot. Now, we still don't know what the Initiative is working on, though it's supposed to be a big single-player experience. There is a lot of speculation that they could be working on a new Perfect Dark game with the Coalition, but this once again shows you how committed Xbox is in developing first-party games. Not only are they acquiring studios, but they built a few, including the Initiative and World's Edge, which is working on Age of Empires. That's the thing, though. A lot of people will have you believe they're just acquiring studios, but that's not the case at all. They're actually expanding each and every one of their studios. Whether that be Rare, Obsidian, Ninja Theory, or any of their first-party studios, they are hiring a lot of new people. They are giving these studios with untapped potential all of the resources they need to make great games. They're also giving them creative freedom with a hands-off approach. Now, these studios just need to execute. They do also have Xbox Game Publishing, which is the one that often creates confusion on what they actually do. This is not the same as these other studios. What they do is they partner up with third parties to make first-party games. Ori, Recore, Quantum Break, Tell Me Why, Flight Simulator, and games like that are the result of Xbox Game Publishing teaming up with third-party developers. So it's really hard to tell what exactly they're going to do and what games they're going to work on next. But the icing on the cake, however, is Xbox Game Pass. Xbox Game Pass is easily the best deal in gaming, and the fact they launch all of their first-party games into Xbox Game Pass day one is absolutely amazing. We just talked about how they have 23 different studios, many of which are working on multiple games. That means you are getting nearly 40 games through Xbox Game Pass day one. I mean, if you add up the price of 40 games, assuming they're $60 AAA games, that would cost you $2,400 if you bought them day one, more if they're $70. Instead, with Xbox Game Pass, you pay $10 to $15 a month. That is crazy, and that's not even including big third-party games like The Witcher 3 and Red Dead Redemption 2, which has both been in Xbox Game Pass. See, that's the winning formula for Xbox. Xbox Game Pass really has changed everything for them. Their entire strategy revolves around this service. They have created an entire Xbox ecosystem with the idea of Xbox Game Pass being in the center. You can play on a PC, your phone, through xCloud, or on their consoles such as Xbox Series. It really doesn't matter. They want you in that service, which both benefits them and the consumers. It's absolutely crazy, and I think it's going to change gaming as a whole. So with all of these things, it's easy to see why the Xbox Series will be the best generation ever for Xbox. Ever since Phil Spencer took over, they've been working to this point, and while it's been a long journey, it's all about to take shape, and it's going to be very exciting. I know the Xbox One wasn't the greatest generation, and Xbox fans had to be very patient, but the future of Xbox is very bright. Anyways though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.